it really bothers me when I see even something like tragically happened in Uvalde, where we had 19 students killed, two teachers, and then recently one of the teachers' husbands died of a heart attack, maybe related. I can imagine with the stress. I'm watching that. I don't even know which channel it was, but I start hearing people from both sides of the aisle using it to politicize issues of gun control and whether the governor of the state is doing enough of this or enough of that. There's time for that. But in the meantime, we've got people down there that are really hurting and need resources and help. And it just really is offensive to my sensibilities to see people getting up on their hind legs and running an agenda on top of that. I hate to see that.
I would push back on the framing of that because my pushback would be that when is the time to have these conversations? And people always say, well, the bodies they're still warm. And as someone who lived through a mass shooting, one of my good friends, I write about it, Clemente Pinckney, was the pastor at Mother Emanuel AME Church, and him along with 8 others. I mean, they like in Buffalo. I would just say Dylan Roof took the best of us. He walked into a church doing Bible study and shot 9 people.
Tragic.
When do you have these conversations? And what I resent more than the politicization or whatever you may call it is the do nothingness. Because we've had, you had, people forget we had the largest mass shooting in the history of the world in Las Vegas, Nevada,
Right.
in the concert. We've had Parkland, we've had Sandy Hook, we've had Fort Hood, we've had Charleston. I mean, the list of mass shootings, school shootings goes on and on and on. And so I understand the space needed to grieve. I mean, we're still grieving in Charleston, and it happened in 2015. But what frustrates me more is the do nothingness of our quote unquote leaders on both sides of the aisle.
Well, I agree that nothing has been done. And this is a matter of coming up with a model of prevention, not intervention. But I'll push back on your pushback and say people deserve their space in that moment. Let's at least give them center stage and space because, as you point out, what's been done? Does 3 to 5 days make a difference? I think based on results, it hasn't. So we can at least be respectful of those that are hurting instead of interrupting press conferences and beating on the drum. How about instead we actually get some meaningful legislation? We actually get a plan of prevention that should 100% be bipartisan. This doesn't have anything to do with the Second Amendment. Everybody frames it that way, but it doesn't have anything to do with Second Amendment.
You will not get an argument from me out of that. I'm a concealed weapons permit holder. I'm a Democrat from South Carolina, which doesn't make me the most liberal Democrat in the world. I got my CWP. I was in a class with Nikki Haley, of all people, one of my good friends who were actually from the same small county in Bamberg, South Carolina. And so I get all of that. I understand it, and it should be. But you have to have something to get 60 votes. And I'm going to be extremely blunt with you, Dr. Phil, and I think that's why whether or not people like me or not, I think they always respect my truth. But when 20 white kids were killed in Sandy Hook, and we did absolutely nothing, our country became so desensitized to that. It became so normalized. When we did nothing after Sandy Hook, I was completely jaded by the thoughts that anything would happen in the future. And so I was speaking to a colleague today at CNN, and I said, it's very difficult to be a new parent. My 16-year-old is my stepchild, and my 3-year-olds, of course, are mine. But it's very difficult to go through this phase of sending your kid to school because you know it's going to happen again. Your prayer has to be that it doesn't happen to your children. And that is an anxiety inducing moment.
Well, it is. There were 61 active shooters on campus in 2021. That's more than one a week.
I mean, and you think about this kid um, in Texas, he went and got an AR-15 on 2 different occasions and 350 bullets. And nobody stopped to think that maybe there needed to be some pause, or maybe there needed to be some further. I just don't get it. I think that there's some common sense, basic things we can do, and we're just not there.
You said when Sandy Hook happened and there were all of those white children that got killed and nothing happened. Why do you point out that they're white children?
I think that for a country that has a true question mark on the value of certain lives and the benefit of humanity, I think by bringing in that component and being extremely clear in the description thereof, and saying that there's no question these lives matter, there's no question of the value of the sanctity of these lives. This is not in question at all. And we did nothing. I think that exacerbates and drives home my point. It also, Dr. Phil, in a probably decently cynical way, is decently sensationalized. I recognize that. It draws people to the sentiment, but it also points out a true fact that we did nothing after Sandy Hook. And I stand on the resolve that if we did nothing after Sandy Hook, we won't do anything now.
Yeah. So your point is if you didn't do anything after those white kids were shot, they're sure not going to do anything if minority children are killed.
Not after 70% Hispanic community was shot up, no.
So you don't have much hope that that's going to send a message up the chain that says, okay, enough's enough, too much is too much. Now's the time.
I hope I'm wrong. But I mean, do you have faith something? I mean, it's your show. I don't mean to be posing questions to
No,
you.
ask me anything you want.
But do you have faith that anything's going to change? And if so, what is that faith rooted in?
My hope is that at some point, there's got to be a tipping point where America says enough's enough and too much is too much. And if anything is going to cause the left and right to come together, then somebody that goes in and guns down innocent children. I mean, these children were 9, 10 years old. That to me is about the most cowardly, egregious thing you can do. And it just seems really hard to imagine that anybody from the far left to the far right could disagree that that is an absolute stain on our nation, that that is a horrible thing to keep happening. Like I said, it's 61 times in 2021. At some point, if there's a bipartisan issue, protecting our young people and our elderly seems to be something that everybody should find non-threatening and come together on. It just seems like if you're going to pick something, that would be a place that people could rally around.
I hear you and I don't disagree. I just don't. And I think there'll be the recognition thereof. A solution or a policy solution or an implementation of something to change or alter the path of where we're at, not where we're headed. I just don't see that happening. I mean, I don't see universal background checks have over 75, 80% approval from both left and right, all races, all age groups, and we still haven't passed it. I mean, just that simple policy proposal. We can't get that done. And it's the do nothingness again. And I say that as the kids say, we gotta, who wants to smoke, both sides of the aisle deserve that.
Well, why is that? Why is there the do nothingness? From the inside out, what do you see?
I see it being a lack of courage. I see the role of special interest. I mean, the same week you have a mass shooting, you have individuals from the great state of Texas going to an NRA convention to speak. And the NRA, it's not what it once was, but I would argue the NRA is probably the second or third most powerful lobby behind the AARP. Um, um, it's a lack of vision. Um, and it's I don't think that our elected officials are truly listening to the pain that you and I, and we don't, there are not enough conversations like the one that you and I are having. I would ask, outside of hunting hogs or hunting and killing hogs, why do you need an AR-15? Why does anyone need an AR-15? And those are just legitimate questions that, me and John Kasich, the Republican governor of former Republican governor of Ohio, we agree on that sentiment. And we've had people agree on that sentiment. It's just something right now that we're so polarized and people want to yell. The two things we hear all the time when these things happen, the people want to yell about mental health. And there's been no indication that this young man had any mental illness. And then people want to say, what about Chicago? And both of those things, as you stated earlier, I truly resent.
If there's a path to overcome the do nothingness, what is it?
Electing better people. When are you running for Senate, Dr. Phil? I'll come support you.
I think about what you just said about electing better people. I wonder sometimes if the better people have the attitude that you get into the system and you just get bogged down and they think they can have more impact from the outside in than the inside out.
I mean, I think that that's a reasonable. And then you look around and why would you want to work with some of these people that are there, to be honest with you? When I first got elected, I was 21, 22 years old. And I remember going in the State House and I would look at folk and I would be like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm here. And then after about a month, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you're here. I can't believe you're here.
Yeah.
How did you get here? It becomes quick. It's cold water on you quite quickly.
Yeah, I suspect you get disillusioned pretty fast.
The funny thing though, Dr. Phil, and the perspective that I come from on all of these things, whether or not it's the issue of race that we talked about, whether or not it's guns or, being forward thinking or whatever, I don't think personally there's anything irredeemable about this country. I just think you have to reimagine what she looks like.